has been here already.
No, I'm still on. I just muted my microphone because by experience, it's just that I'm keeping the camera off in order to improve the quality. In order to improve the quality of the audio.
Okay, good.
Okay. So Nuno, all ready?
Yes, 2 minutes. I'm going to contact these two speakers just to see if something is going on.
I sent a message in the presented chat, so that's the best way to send message. So in the presented chat.
We are not going to run polls, Nuno, right?
No, we don't need that.
But you will flag out the questions and.
So Stefan, regarding the questions, either you check yourself or you can at any moment refer to Katka, and she will read to you or to everyone a question that we find relevant. We'll keep screening.
We need to start 10 seconds, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to this session of the Research and Innovation Days that will be dedicated to the new age of finance, incorporating sustainability into InvestEU and private funds. As you probably, I will want to welcome the speakers and the audience in a minute. As you probably all know, in 2015, two landmark international agreements were adopted, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreements. Signatories set out ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to limit the increase of the Earth's temperature to 2 degrees or even 1.5 degrees. For the Commission, the green transition is a key priority. Last year, the Commission launched the European Green Deal with the objective of making Europe carbon neutral by 2050. It will furthermore propose soon more ambitious targets to reach by 2030. The Green Deal presents a new growth strategy for Europe, transforming the European Union into a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy. In order to mobilize finance for sustainable growth, the Commission has placed sustainability considerations at the heart of its funding instruments, notably the InvestEU and Horizon Europe programs. However, climate change cannot be addressed by the public sector alone. We need the active involvement of the financial sector to help channel investments toward more sustainable technologies and businesses, finance sustainable long-term growth, and create a low-carbon, climate-resilient and circular economy. In this sense, the Commission's action plan on sustainable finance features, among other things, regulations on an EU taxonomy for sustainable activities and on sustainability disclosure and on the development of low-carbon benchmarks. InvestEU will be the flagship investment program to boost the European economy in the next EU budget that will cover the years 2021 to 2027. It brings under one roof all current financial instruments, including InnoFin, the financial instrument under Horizon 2020, which has been supporting successfully innovative companies in Europe and beyond since 2014. One of the policy windows under InvestEU will be dedicated to research, innovation, and digitalization, and will include specific products to support investment in new technologies, sustainable solutions, and disruptive innovation in support of the Green Deal objectives. Today, I am joined by professionals from the public and private sectors, and together we will explore the different methods being developed for integrating sustainability consideration in public and private funding, as well as products, notably under the InvestEU program, in order to reach the European Green Deal objective. Let me welcome our speaker of this session. So first, I don't see him on screen. Oh yeah, I see you on screen. Giorgio Caron-Cassoni, who is heading in DG ECFIN InvestEU, the preparation of the InvestEU program, and in particular will discuss with us the climate and environmental tracking and sustainability proofing guidelines. Then we have also with us Aldo Romani, who is the head of the Sustainability Funding Unit at the European Investment Bank, who will present the EIB's roadmap for becoming the EU climate bank, as well as its specific instruments for climate action and environmental sustainability. Then we have Tomasz Koslowski, head of mandate and product development at the European Investment Fund, who will share with us his insight into environmental consideration in the areas of venture capital investing and the EIF's toolbox for investments in climate and environmental solutions. Then we have Benedict Carriger, who is Associate Director for EU Affairs at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, who will present the EBRD's approach to sustainable finance, especially vis-à-vis InvestEU and its objective to become a green bank by 2025. Then we have Guido Moret, Head of Sustainability Integration Fixed Income at Robeco, who will provide a funds manager perspective and how can they help implement sustainability principle and align with the Paris Agreement. Then we have Ian Cochran, who is Program Director at the Institute for Climate Economics and Program Director for the MSc in Climate Change Finance and Investment at the University of Edinburgh Business School, who will present the general framework for aligning with the Paris Agreement. So to all of you, welcome. And then I will start by turning to all of you to make a short introduction for those of you that have slides to present the activities that you have in the area of sustainability. So I turn first to Giorgio.
Thank you, Stefan. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I hope you can hear me. And I just wanted to have a short intro. I just wanted to have a short introduction on the system that we have envisaged under InvestEU, just to launch the discussion. We have been InvestEU, as you said, is groups together all the previous financial instruments and EFSI under a single umbrella, and it opens up not only to the EIB and EIF, our partners for several decades in financial instruments, but also to other implementing partners like EBRD, we have Benedict here, and others. So the co-legislator have asked us to track climate expenditure according to certain methodology that we are developing, and also have a sustainability proofing method to make sure that all investments done are conform with not only comply with in general with Paris alignment, but also we can test positive and negative aspects and externalities of projects. So in general, we have, in terms of tracking, an overall, for the moment, target 30%. This is still to be decided by the co-legislators. That's why it's in square brackets. And 60% in particular for the sustainable infrastructure window. We expect the research window also to contribute significantly to this climate expenditure for research and innovation in climate areas. And then we have a tracking guidance that is being developed now by the Commission in cooperation with implementing partners. We realize that all different implementing partners have different tracking systems, although they are built on a common set of principles established between multilateral development banks and including also EIB and EIF. At the same time, we are developing in-house this taxonomy regulation that is going to be applied as of 2021. Taxonomy applies, defines what is sort of deep green in accordance with certain criteria. So we are now currently working in defining, and if you go to the next slides, to the defining tracking principles in accordance with what we have taken into account, also the different systems of the EIB, the other implementing partners, but building on what we are the Commission markets, which have been defined, for example, in the context of structural funds and in other programs, including research, but also with different coefficients for climate and environment. And also now progressively we are studying with colleagues of FISMA, but also about the DGs, how to combine the two, try to combine as best as possible these two types of methodologies in order, for example, in certain areas for the market to actually apply that this is taxonomy response to a certain taxonomy, to all taxonomy requirements. So we are in the process of doing so in a working group, and this will it will be at the end there will be a commission notice on how this is to be implemented. If we go to the next slides, this apart from tracking investment, we are also looking then at the content of the individual projects that are to be financed. And the co-legislator have asked us to make sure that all projects are screened in accordance with three dimensions: environmental, climate, and social. And it's very interesting to see that they are not only, the proofing is not only geared towards minimize detrimental impact, so it's basically compliance with the legislation, but also try to establish appropriate mitigating measures in case some environmental risks are unavoidable in investment projects. So let's say only the safeguard place, but also try to see how to maximize benefits in these three dimensions in all the projects. The guidance is being developed now, again in a working group with potential implementing partner, and we expect a commission notice by the end of we hope end of 2020, or at least to have a very stable text end of 2020 and have it ready at the beginning of 2021. If we move to the next slide, on the sustainability proofing, this, as Stefan explained, this InvestEU applies to a lot of projects. So it ranges from microfinance to unemployed people, or to SMEs of a very small size, SMEs of a medium size, and infrastructure projects, research projects. So all these projects have a very different sustainability dimension. In the past, the Commission has been working on a climate proofing for major projects for structural funds, but it's the first time that we engage in let's say, opening up the sustainability proofing to other areas which are non-infrastructure projects, essentially, and also research and corporate projects, and give us, in order to give some guidance. Our partner institutions like the DIP or DBRD, they have a lot of experience already in that, in their current practice, but others are not so advanced. And what is important, and it comes maybe also later, we are not, obviously, when we have a project of a very small size, we discussed about microfinance, but also the bulk of projects for SMEs, they will be so small that it would be too burdensome from an administrative point of view to require a full sustainability proofing for these projects. That's why the co-legislator have asked us to set a threshold under which there would be no obligation of sustainability proofing. We will, in our let's say, initial thoughts, and I shared also with the others, the threshold would be set at 10 million, with the exception of project cost. So this would exclude most of the SME business, to the exclusion of those projects that fall under Annex A of the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive, because these are, if they bear important risks, even if the project costs are below that threshold, they need to be fully screened. Before the full proofing is done, the implementing partner will have to do a screening to assess immediately whether a proofing is needed or not, and this the results of which will be communicated to let's say, the investment committee that eventually decides on the granting of the guarantee. So I think, Stefan, with that, I would stop and move to the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Giorgio, for this presentation on InvestEU and what it does and what it has foreseen to do on sustainability. and the integration of the sustainability goal. Can I now turn to Aldo Romani from the EIB to tell us how the EIB is going about integrating sustainability objectives? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The angle I'm bringing into the discussion with my introduction today is focused on the relationship between capital markets, so essentially bond markets, and the implementation of the EU objectives in this field. So if you could please put the presentation on the screen. The idea, I am responsible for the issuance of climate awareness bonds and sustainability awareness bonds at the EIB. And the idea that I would like to discuss is that in fact capital markets have a role to play not only in the provision of capital, but also in the identification of where that capital should in fact be best deployed. So at the end of last year, the board of directors of the bank clarified what the objectives of the EU Climate Bank are like. By the end of 2020, the EIB should align all financing activities with the principles and goals of the Paris Agreement, therefore targeting carbon neutrality by 2050. From the end of 2021, the bank has committed to end financing for unabated fossil fuel energy projects. By 2025, the bank should gradually increase the share of financing dedicated to climate action and environmental sustainability to reach 50% of new operations. And with its action in the period between 2021 and 2030, the EIB should support a total of 1 trillion of investments in the areas of climate action and environmental sustainability. Now, what is the major issue for markets, for capital markets in this context? Lack of clarity. It is lack of clarity as a general issue with regard to green finance, as highlighted by the G20 in September 2016 in the G20 Green Finance Synthesis Report. It is clear that lack of clarity hampers investment. This is linked to different definitions of what is green. It is linked also to the absence of a common terminology in financial markets. Is also different jurisdictions with different priorities. Now, this is the main reasoning behind the intervention of the GFISMA in September 2016 to reform sustainable finance. The idea being that in an internal market that should support sustainability, you cannot have properly functioning markets if everybody is free to define what is green and what is not. Therefore, the intervention of the Commission with the first priority to establish a shared definition of green that should have validity in all markets of the European Union. And this is essentially the sense of the so-called taxonomy regulation that entered into force in July this year and provides a totally new framework to the issuance activities of the EIB. Now, the EIB inaugurated the green bond market back in 2007 with the clear motivation that you can see highlighted on this page. Accountability in the future disbursements in the fields of renewable energy and energy efficiency, and precise definition of the types of projects to be included in this category. At the time, the EIB had scaled up its financing activities objectives in the areas of renewable energy and energy efficiency in support of the Energy Action Plan. The idea that was realized by the Capital Markets Department with the world's first green bond was that it would have a value for the market if the bank could make itself accountable, not only in terms of the volume of signatures, but also in terms of the actual volume of disbursements in the course of time under the umbrella of what was going to be signed. In order to monitor properly how things evolve in terms of disbursements, you need to indeed have a precise definition of the projects that you want to represent to markets. And we put in place an infrastructure that provides information to investors with the reliability that investors require. So this obviously met very much this kind of core approach, the approach that the Commission took in September 2016. And this explained also why the EIB was asked, in addition to its technical knowledge in the field, to contribute a showcase for the discussion on taxonomy in the area of climate change mitigation, but based also on its understanding of how capital markets work. Now, if you move to the next page, page 4, you see that the uniformity of application of definitions is not only relevant across capital markets, it's also relevant along the investment chain. On page 4, you can see a graph that is directly taken from the EU Green Bond Standard that clarifies the approach that the Commission has taken. In order to judge of the sustainability of a financial product, independently from the typology of the product, you have to perform a sustainability analysis of the underlying economic activities. So if you look at the investment chain that, for example, the EIB faces as an intermediary, you see that if you ask investors to report on the sustainability content of their investment portfolios, they have to come to us, speak to me as the person that talks to them and issue them bonds in order to source that information. But it is also clear that the activities that are closest to the real economy are the lending activities of the bank. And therefore, our bonds, in fact, shed light on the underlying activities of the bank in the area of sustainability. So if you move forward to the next page, you see that the EU Green Bond Standard requires alignment of the allocations from green bonds with the EU sustainability taxonomy. And this is a link that the EIB has established in the documentation of its climate awareness bonds and of its other sustainability awareness bonds that cover the entire spectrum of the sustainability objectives of the EU with this kind of approach, because we established already at the end of 2018 a direct link with the taxonomy regulation and therefore the upcoming sustainability taxonomy. In addition, we have committed, and this is practiced since 2016, to publish on a yearly basis not only allocation reports as required currently by the EU Green Bond Standard proposal that was advanced by the TEG, but also impact reports with reasonable assurance by KPMG. So if you move to the next page, you see what is happening now in practice. The EIB offers investors two types of bonds. Climate awareness bonds have a focus on climate change mitigation. Sustainability awareness bonds have a focus on, are allocated to any other environmental or social objectives that is in line with the EU objectives. And thanks to the fact, for example, that the taxonomy covers not only renewable energy, but also energy efficiency, we are now in a position to extend the spectrum of allocable activities beyond renewable energy and energy efficiency. And this we already did with the first wave of extensions in June upon adoption of the taxonomy regulation. With sustainability awareness bonds, we cover the other environmental objectives, and de facto, our issuance activity permits capital markets to monitor in a direct way how the EU Climate Bank is going to apply the EU sustainability taxonomy to its lending activities. So I leave it here in order to keep within time. If you go to the next page of the presentation, which I guess will also be distributed, you will see a more detailed description of the scheme that I was describing a moment ago, and you see the current status quo. At the moment, CABs and SABs only cover a still limited portion of the activities of the bank, and we are going to extend gradually this the application of the allocations in order to mirror, in fact, the implementation of the EU sustainability taxonomy to the relevant areas of the EIB's activities.
Very much for this very detailed presentation on the part of the EIB. I think it's very important. We'll come back with a few questions afterwards when we go to the question and answer session, but this presents quite well the challenges here that the EIB is undertaking in its transformation into a climate bank. Can I ask now Tomasz Koslowski from the EIF to present the activities of the EIF in this area, please?
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to represent the European Investment Fund, in short, the EIF. We are part of the EIB group. So all those intervention was about EIB, so our mother company, we are the subsidiary. So we are investment arm of the EIB group, pursuing investments in risk capital markets. Our mission is to deliver on the union policies, and we are doing it already for more than 20 years with our partners from the European Commission. Where we play in the SME space, which means typically enterprises below 250 employees, but also with the scale-up companies, and the threshold is that we are present in the markets where the companies are kind of less than 500 employees. The bigger companies, corporate and direct financing is not our domain; it's the domain of the EIB. The slide here shows you our business model. I think it's kind of important to state it vis-a-vis the context on the discussion that we are having on the sustainability. So in a nutshell, EIF is operating in a private market, in a non-public space, which is less transparent, more opaque, and of course very difficult in order to kind of assess various opportunities because of the lack of information. Where we play is we are playing via intermediaries, so we are not financing companies directly, but are collaborating with various intermediaries, and these are, for instance, private equity players, venture capital funds. So in a nutshell, we are an investor, we are a limited partner. At the same time, what we do in addition, we are taking risk. We are taking risk on the SMEs by providing guarantees and securitization solutions to unlock access to finance for the SMEs. And as you can see, we are present along various verticals and in all stages of the company's development. So our objective is to actually accelerate the development and scaling of companies from the seed stage until they are ready to pick up the financing on the public market. Very important for our discussion is to define where EIF is playing. So we have highlighted the overarching SME space, but this type of interventions in case of EIF will be very, very focused. So if you look at the chart, the verticals represent the areas where we play. So this is the areas in which we'll be allocating our capital and also our mandated resources. So we'll be developing business in competitiveness area, innovation, social impact, skills and human capital, and as well predominantly sustainability and green transformation. So this is actually the universe where and how EIF is placing the products on the market. And this is where we actually going to identify opportunities, source opportunities, and then report on them in the overarching framework. And overall, we are incorporating in that assessment the sustainable development goals. So this is our lighthouse in how we would work from now on. If you could still retain that slide, which was before, what I would like to say that in addition, we'll kind of approach the market from the horizontal perspective. So despite the fact that we'll be acting in various policy areas, we'll be looking actively at tracking the various climate interventions across these policy areas in order to report back to the policy, to the Commission and the outside stakeholders about our impact. And we'll be also looking at the way the intermediaries approach sustainability, and this is due to our intermediate model. So ESG assessment will be a key in everything we do when we are going to decide on allocation of resources to financial intermediaries. And of course, we'll be looking at our activities from Paris alignment perspective. So it will be embodied in various eligibility criteria, niche codes restrictions that ultimately would implement the no harm principle. If you go to this slide, this shows you the area of green financing the IF is going to undertake. We can clearly identify three main areas where we would like to make an impact with respect to our product. One area on the top is green transformation guarantees. So this is where we provide the risk taking to various intermediaries like banks, loan funds, debt funds across Europe in order to help them to take risk on companies that want to transition to clean energy. So we'll be looking at the energy generation, we'll be looking at mobility solutions, we'll be looking at efficiency, also both in the sector which are industrial sectors as well as residential ones, and we'll be supporting innovation in clean technologies. And we'll be providing this support through risk taking. So ultimately that we can share the risk together with the private sector in order to have this transition. Second pillar, very important to us, is venture capital investments and private equity investments. So we'll be looking for investing in funds who are climate and environmentally conscious. And there are various types of players in the market. We can expand it later on in this webinar. But in essence, we'll be investing in purely clean tech funds or generalist funds as well who are kind of embodying environmental solutions. But ideally, we have to transition the market to environmentally impact focused funds where they not only embody the scope in terms of the investment strategy, but as well measure the impact and have the incentives tied in to the outcomes that ultimately this strategy aims to deliver. And last but not least, we are going to intervene in the market via our new business line, which is going to be investments in infrastructure funds. And the areas where we want to contribute in that aspect is clean transition to energy generation, environmental resources, and always sustainable transport. So this is the toolbox of the IF in order to achieve the green transition of the European economy.
Thank you, Tomasz, for this presentation. I will now turn normally towards Benedict, but I'm not sure she's still with us. Is Benedict here with us now? In case she's not, we will move then to Guido Moret of Robeco. Guido, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Stefan. Yeah, from the asset manager perspective, so more the private sector perspective. First of all, we are actually very positive about the plans of the European Commission to indeed define what is sustainable and therefore kind of what is not, or at least what is at best neutral. Because I fully agree with what Aldo was also saying, that clarity is very important for us as investors in the public markets and when serving our clients. And let me go to the next slide and explain what exactly we're doing in terms of climate change in particular, but is also, you can extend this to a broader sustainability topic. But focusing on climate change, well, we're very clear. We aim to make a contribution to the Paris Agreement by keeping the Earth's temperature well below 2 degrees. And realizing that we're already at 1 degree at the moment, there is not that much bandwidth left. And that's also, of course, shown in the IPCC scenarios. And you can see the one on the left-hand side of the slide. Rapid decarbonization is needed. And indeed, if you realize that in 2020, where we're at now, we're at 40, and in 2030, you need to be around 20 to stay within this green area. Then the European Commission's plans of decarbonizing even more than 50% by 2030 makes a lot of sense. This is something that then we feel as our task to achieve in our portfolios as well. And we have a variety of tools how we want to achieve that. Of course, first we need to analyze where the climate risk actually is in our portfolios, but then next to that, we have to raise awareness also with the investee companies. So engagement is part of that, and integrating this in our investment approach. But the most important part, I believe, to achieve this is decarbonizing our assets. And what do we mean with decarbonizing? With that we mean actually what is kind of also explained in the EU benchmark regulation, that year on year you lower the carbon intensity of your investments. And of course, external reporting to provide a transparency of what is actually happening in different funds across all the portfolios that we have, and not only the ones that we know score well, but all of them, is also important. If we go to the next slide, I want to explain something that is very important to us as investors when we define sustainable investing, and that there are two components that are sometimes a bit confused, and these are what we call ESG integration. So that is integrating environmental, social, and governance factor in an investment decision. And on the other side, you have impact investing. Both are about the interaction between society at large and the issuer of securities. So when focusing on climate change, it's about the relation of companies, but also countries, and the impact that they have on climate change and vice versa. And when we look at the left-hand side, how does sustainable development affect an issuer, or how does climate change affect an issuer? Asking that question and trying to answer it, that is what ESG integration is. However, that does not necessarily make your investment decision more sustainable. It only takes into account the risk that you run. And if you feel there's no risk in emitting greenhouse gases, and maybe in certain areas of the world, there's actually very little risk for your investments of doing so, not in the EU, but outside of it, there's not much risk of emitting greenhouse gases at this point for your investment, not for the planet, but for your investment in, for instance, Russia or India. However, from an impact point of view, your starting point is not a financial one. It is about the impact that you have on society, or that the investee company or the country that you finance that has an economy. And then if you don't like it, you can exclude it. You can exclude coal if you would like, if you think that has no place in society anymore. Or you can also look, of course, for the solutions, which would then be called impact investing. But I think it's very important to distinguish between these two, because ESG integration is sometimes portrayed as having a positive impact on society, but it does not necessarily have one. At least that's not the aim of it. But of course, with the internalization of externalities that we do observe, so companies that have a positive impact on society may outperform in the long run, and the ones with a negative performance could underperform in the long run, then of course there is a feedback loop, and then this circle is indeed round, as you see on the slide. But the line of thinking is different. And for climate change, if we go to the next slide, and also my final slide, you see that also these two aspects are relevant. On the ESG integration side, it's the focus of if companies are still able to generate value in the long run. And you could also extend this to countries. You could very much wonder if the dependency also of, for instance, developed countries like Canada and Australia on very heavy oil and coal is viable in the future. And the relevant framework here is the one provided by the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. It's about the financial impact of climate change. On the impact investing side, that is where we find limiting global warming, and the relevant frameworks there are the Paris Agreement, and also, in our view, the Action Plan for Financing Sustainable Growth is very much in the impact investing side. And of course, the impact, if you have a negative impact on climate change and the regulatory frameworks change and consumer preference change and everything, then of course that feeds through in ESG integration in the investment decision. But the frameworks and the line of thinking are different, and that is what I wanted to highlight. We combine both, at least we try to combine both in our investment strategies, and we are committed to this decarbonization, and in that way, making a contribution in allocating capital in the financial markets.
Thank you, Guido, for this presentation. Now I will turn to Ian Cochran, who is from the Institute for Climate Economics. Ian, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. Can you hear me all right? Just to
Yes.
check.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, depending on the time zone, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for this opportunity to join the discussion today. I'll go ahead and get started while my slides are getting put up on the screen. So I am from the Institute for Climate Economics, which is not a financial institution. We are a nonprofit research think tank. And I also am working at the University of Edinburgh in the business school where I run the MSc related to climate change, finance, and investment. I've been asked today to say a couple of words about work that I did more with my Institute for Climate Economics hat at the end of last year, and that we're in the process of updating at the moment, which tried to propose a framework for alignment with the Paris Agreement. And today's discussion is a bit broader, obviously, than just climate change and the Paris Agreement. But I do believe that a number of the different points, and great, I see my slides are now up, are very much valid for the conversation on broader sustainable development. And in many cases in these slides, I think you can almost replace the term climate with the 17 different SDGs. Climate is SDG 13 from memory, and we can begin to see how a framework for alignment can go beyond just what's proposed here on climate, but for helping think about the other sustainable development goals. So on this first slide, what we see is that our point of departure was really to say, how is the financial sector going to be looking at alignment? And I think actually Guido, with his presentation, just made a number of points that I was looking to make, and perhaps in a much clearer way for financial sector actors, but saying that there will be those actors who are either looking to directly or are mandated to directly contribute to achieving our shared climate or sustainability goals. And I'd put a lot of the public finance institutions, of course, in that group. And then we'll have we'll have all financial institutions that will need to respond and manage the risks and opportunities that are going to stem from this transformation of our economy. And I think we really need to see this as a transformation. We're not talking about incremental changes at this stage. We're talking about, particularly in terms of climate, some major systemic changes in how the economy needs to be powered and function in a number of areas moving forward. And then, of course, all actors, real economy or financial, will need to take into account and respond to the changing physical climate. But again, here, I think we could put in a lot of the other environmental and social objectives here, where we also have real risks related to historical trends and how we've dealt with those issues. So I'm actually not sure if I have control of the slides. Yes, I think I do. If we then look at the framework that we propose, what we've said about thinking about this idea of aligning or making sure that your activities from an economic or financial perspective are consistent with these long-term goals, there are three areas that we need to pay attention to. Firstly, and of course this is now probably more from a research center's perspective, if you are saying you are aligned, and what you should be seeking if you are seeking to align, is that it's a comprehensive scope of action. This is not limiting this activity to one portfolio, to one product. This is really looking across all of the activities of an institution at how they're contributing to this low greenhouse gas climate resilient development. And of course, we need a place to start. So, a single fund or a product.
Well, the problem I can't hear them anymore.
But we really need to be looking at the bigger picture. And I think the urgency requires to scale up relatively quickly.
Yeah, it's on. It's fine.
Oops, I think there might be someone who might just need to mute themselves. Secondly, we need to be thinking about the long term. I think historically, a lot of the discussions about climate change have been looking at supporting activities that lead to any form of reduction, particularly when we're using a type of baseline approach, saying, if it reduces emissions at least by a little bit, it's good.
I don't want to, if I talk, they will hear me, no? I don't want to.
We can hear you.
We do hear you.
If you could turn off your microphone, that would be very much appreciated. I think it might be Benedict, excuse me. We really need to be thinking about the long term. And so this is about making sure our actions, as well as our counterparties, the projects and the counterparties have the long term in mind as well. Is the ambition of the project and the counterparty within the ambition we need to follow the pathway set out to achieve decarbonization or other sustainability objectives. And finally, the final point is really thinking about the ambition. And here I actually just want to spend a little bit more time than the other two pillars, because I think it requires a bit more explanation. And I'm not sure if this is going to be, nope, it's not actually animated. My animations have been pulled out. But what we've proposed in terms of thinking about ambition is a kind of bullseye target, where on the outside and across everything an institution should be doing is this do no harm principle, that all of the activities need to avoid locking in effects in the real economy that are counterproductive to our goals. And that's a minimum requirement. On top of that, institutions should be aiming to have some type of Paris-consistent climate co-benefits, where the investments made, the transactions, the counterparties supported are, whenever possible, contributing to our goals. And then finally, and I think this dark circle, I heard the term someone else use dark green, I think earlier, that might have been Aldo, I'm not sure, is really about those transformative changes that need to happen. And I think this is where we, and hopefully the laugh was not about what I'm saying, but more about, we really are seeking from the public funding.
En hoeveel langer is die sessie? Ik denk dat wij tot het einde.
Thank you. So there, on this very important part, and particularly in terms of public funds, we need to be thinking about how we're seeking to support transformative outcomes. We're not just incrementally building another solar array. We're not incrementally building another windmill. What we're doing is a demonstration effect, a kind of a market changing or market structuring pilot project, or supporting the development of a value chain to really help bring about the broader transformation we need. Sorry for that being a bit disjointed, just not usually trying to do that with two voices at once. So our work also looked a little bit about where to start. And again, the animation's been stripped out of this, but what we have is this kind of three-pillared framework that in our mind needs to then be connected with some type of pathway or vision or commitment to what the shape of the transition is going to be in a given country, region, or area of operations. Those two pieces paired then needs to be both linked into these overarching strategies, so the high-level objectives that financial actors are setting, what we're really seeking to see happen at an institutional portfolio level, but also be translated into a number of tools and instruments that are integrated into the structuring and appraisal process. And I think we've heard from a number of the speakers today that different institutions are moving forward both at this high-level strategy, but also more at the operational level to develop the tools and taxonomies and different criteria needed. And I think my last 2 points will be about, we're not starting, and I think others have said this, from zero on this. I also run the secretariat that I foresee of the Climate Action in Financial Institutions Initiative, where we work with the EBRD, with the EIB, as well as a broad number of commercial banks to think about how would you integrate these mainstreaming principles for climate action to your activities. And then, of course, there's many others, including the TCFD, IIGCC, Katowice Collective Commitment on Climate Action, and the PRBs who are developing very good tools and ideas about how to begin to take these concrete steps. And I'll end here. I'm sorry, Stefan, if I'm running a bit long, on just where I see where we are today. And I think we have three challenges before us. One is operational, where we're seeing the assessing climate risks and opportunities in some portfolios and in some areas, but we're not really seeing this perhaps at the scale of all activities. And that's where we really need to be relatively quickly, even given the current challenging context of the different post-COVID, or unfortunately not post yet, responses to COVID that we see governments and different financial institutions scaling up. We have an informational issue, we're good at looking right now at the historic greenhouse gas emissions of a counterparty, but we're still having challenges in terms of identifying and assessing the potential of a counterparty against a forward-looking baseline of where they need to be to support our shared goals. And then finally, I think we come to what I've termed aspirational, but it's actually probably a bit more than that, is that we really need to make sure countries are setting these policy frameworks that inspire the confidence that the transition is a good bet. Because in the end, the financial sector plays a key role in the economy, but it's not a replacement for the real economy actors and the policymakers. So we definitely need to see that framework coming, as well as the pipeline of projects from all sides, to really ensure that they see this transition as a good bet and it can help them meet their mandates and fiduciary duties as financial institutions. So apologies if I was a bit long, but I hope that provides a little bit of a framework that's useful for the discussion moving forward.
Thank you, Ian. I see that now Benedict has rejoined us and has tested her microphone during your presentation. Sorry for that.
No worries. I'll go ahead and turn mine off now.
Yeah, please. And Benedict, now you have the floor. I think you don't have a presentation, but you have the floor to explain to us the EBRD's approach.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Stefan, and sorry for all the technical issues. Yeah, so thank you very much, and apologies that my camera is not working. But indeed, the promotion of sustainable development is very much at the heart of the EBRD's mandate. So our business model is focused on the private sector, and it includes a range of proven green financing tools that we plan to build upon to really achieve systemic change in our countries of operations, and including in the context of InvestEU. So in 2015, in the run-up to the COP21, we launched our first green economy transition approach, and we set ourselves a very ambitious target of reaching a green finance ratio of 40% by 2020. And at the time, our green finance ratio was only around 28%. So that ambitious target has already been reached. In 2019, we had a green finance ratio of 46%, meaning that out of the 10 billion euro that the EBRD had deployed, 4.6 billion, were already directed towards green finance. What about the coming years? Well, our objective beyond 2020 is to scale up our existing activities and to support green innovation to address the urgent climate and environmental challenges faced by our countries of operations. Obviously, today, these countries are also confronted with the economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in that context, what we very much want to support is a green economic recovery. Well, the authorities in our countries of operations are obviously trying to protect the health of their citizens and also the domestic economy. And there is very much a temptation to ignore climate concerns and to pour stimulus money into existing and high carbon businesses. To us at EBRD, it would really be a lost opportunity. We really see this crisis as an opportunity to turn the large-scale recovery spending that is being pledged into a real accelerator towards a low-carbon economy and a green transition. So as we are building on our track record in green finance and in policy delivery, we have recently announced a scaled-up green economy transition approach for the years 2021 and 2025. And our target this time is that by 2025, over 50% of our annual business volume will be dedicated to green finance. In the past, the partnership with our donors has been really critical in delivering our environmental and climate objectives. The European Union is not only a shareholder in the EBRD, but also one of its key donors. In the context of InvestEU, there is a commitment that at least 30% of the resources allocated will be directed towards climate objectives. And we see this as very much aligned with our own objective to deploy over 50% of our annual resources towards climate objectives by 2025. So we really see the cooperation with the EU in the context of InvestEU in the coming years as a strong facilitator and contributor to achieving our joint climate objectives. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you, Benedict, for this. I can ask, I see that there are problems to hear us well. I mean, for at least some of the public, I think the technicians are trying to do whatever they can, but I mean, at least for us here on the panel, it seems that we hear each other quite well. And anyway, the session is being recorded and will be posted in order to allow all of you to have a rerun of it in case you cannot follow it appropriately right now. But let's move to a more interactive session. You can use the chat box to actually ask a number of questions directly, and we will relay those questions to the speakers. I will kick off with Giorgio. If you're still with us, Giorgio, can you tell us what do you see the impact of the reduction of the budget of InvestEU on its sustainability goal? What type of choices this will force the European Commission to make, and how do you see the consequences of that going forward? Giorgio, are you still here? Yes, maybe not. Maybe he has problem to speak. So let me turn to Aldo from the IB. You explained to us quite clearly this lack of clarity hampering investment and the intervention of the Commission in order to clarify the definition of what is green. And you explained how these CAB and SAB bonds are actually being implemented. I will have questions on that. I mean, how much of these bonds do you have now in terms of the overall business of the bank? And what are the obstacles to increase their importance in terms of the overall activities of the bank? Aldo?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute my mic. So,
okay, please.
This year we have, so if you can hear me now, so we have issued this year
yes.
9 billion of CABs and SABs on a total of roughly 63 billion. So, as I mentioned before, the issuance of these bonds is linked to the availability of activities that live up to certain criteria that now the Commission is in the phase of establishing. We find ourselves, of course, currently in a transition as the taxonomy regulation is in place, but the first taxonomy for climate will be adopted by the Commission only on at the end of this year for then implementation, concrete implementation from the beginning of 2022. It is foreseen that the second wave of taxonomy for the other environmental objectives that are laid down in the taxonomy regulation will be adopted by the end of next year. So in practical terms, we have anticipated this development and anticipated also the process of implementation of the taxonomy upon the activities on the lending side. So practically, the volume of issuance will depend on the rapidity with which the projects directorate of the bank will be in a position to reclassify the activities of the bank in line with the taxonomy, that is in turn in line with the EU objectives as laid down in the taxonomy regulation. So from that point of view, there is, how could I say, a technical process of transition that will need to, and the issuance activity of caps and subs will move in parallel to this development. We have a taxonomy transition plan at the bank, and this is currently in the process of being developed. So this is the current state of things.
Okay, but the bank has already issued some of these bonds. I mean, it's not a new activity. You are looking now in terms of the activities of the bank as a loan issuer to see whether they could qualify under the categories, and then on that basis you will issue bonds. Is that what we are talking about in terms of the transition?
Yes, no, absolutely. And also, but what I would like to highlight is that so far these instruments have covered only a very limited part of the activities of the bank. So for historic reasons, the first green bond, the first climate awareness bond was issued in 2007. The focus was on renewable energy and energy efficiency only. And therefore, so far, the issuance of climate awareness bonds has been, the proceeds have been only allocated to projects in these two areas. And following restricted criteria that have been applied by our project's experts. Now, what is changing structurally is that the criteria for the allocation of these bonds are now being outsourced and are now going to become, to be defined by the European Commission based on a broader spectrum of activities, for example. And this is the reason why we are now in the process of extending the scope of these bonds to other areas that are, for example, covered by the taxonomy for climate that is in the making. So what I'm trying to say is that this is not a static process. It is in fact a process. It is a process that is where the rules of the game are increasingly determined by the European Commission through the rules of the game that it is establishing with the adoption of a taxonomy.
Okay. Thank you for this. I mean, I will have two follow-on questions on that. The first one would be, I saw in one of your slides that you were very much talking about the actual monitoring of those activities, these impact investments that are taking place out of the loans. And in order to make sure, of course, that whatever has been financed has been actually delivering what it has promised. How does the bank go about this part of the activities? Is the bank itself going to is developing a monitoring tool in order to determine whether the projects actually have delivered what they promised in terms of sustainability and climate, for example?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the bank makes, first of all, an analysis of the expected impact. And in fact, as our bonds are forward-looking, we establish the criteria beforehand and then basically reveal to the investors what has happened in practice in terms of allocation and also of expected impact from those allocations. So this is an ongoing process that basically permits investors to monitor the actual pace of disbursements, as I mentioned, but also to receive information as these disbursements take place on the basis of the most actual information, on the most up-to-date information. So part of our commitment vis-à-vis investors is to review the eligibility percentages that were initially approved as disbursements take place, so as to provide investors with an up-to-date description as to what happens in practice and on the basis of the latest information available. So if, for example, assumptions do not materialize that were considered at the beginning when the loan was approved, these change in assumptions turns into a revision of the eligibility percentages that then determine the actual allocations to be applied in the future. So this adds to all the analysis that are performed as a standard way to look at impact at the bank. We also perform analysis when the projects come to completion. We also continue monitoring the performance, for example, and the impact of these projects based on what has been realized in practice. But with regard specifically now to the focus of the bonds, the focus of the bonds is on the projects that are approved and then disbursed over time with the allocations de facto monitoring what happens in practice at all times. So, and this was effectively the revolutionary idea and the add-on that was created with green bonds in 2007, because implicitly you introduce the notion that it is possible to report on disbursements not only in a sectorial manner as still prevailing practice, but also based on the primary policy objectives that these activities and these investments effectively contribute to. And this fits perfectly into the framework that now the taxonomy regulation is establishing as reference for the whole market.
And then my final question to you would be, do you believe that these developments, in particular the adoption of the EU taxonomy and what you have done yourself at the bank, is driving the whole investment discussion, if we look at the behavior of investors and fund manager, in that direction? In other words, can we expect a much greater alignment out of on the sustainability priorities than we had observed before? What's your feeling about that happening?
I'm absolutely convinced that the regulation, which is in fact the regulation on the establishment of a framework to facilitate sustainable investment, has produced a structural core improvement of the framework within which sustainable investment is going to take place. And I do expect that this will have a substantial impact on the way in which the funds are deployed. And just coming back to Ian's words, I fully agree with his view that the whole activities of an institution or an issuer need to be considered in this context. This is also where the revolutionary component of the taxonomy regulation approach comes to fruition, because it is indeed the economic activities that are going to be assessed based on these common rules that really focus on the core features that markets can understand. And the whole debate on additionality in this context takes a very, very pragmatic relevance. How do you want to add to strategically in a transformational way if you do not classify the existing based on rules that permit the identification? And this is what is going to happen. Of course, the proof is in the pudding, and we will have to see how effectively the taxonomy is adopted and implemented, but I definitely see the conditions for a better functioning of markets in this clarification as to what needs to be financed as given at this point. And I very much welcome, as a market practitioner, the development that has taken place and is going to take place.
Okay, thank you for this very comprehensive answer. Now I see that Giorgio is back. So Giorgio, I was trying to get out of you your views on what happened at the European Council and the overall level of funding that the heads of state and government have selected for InvestEU, and how this will translate on the green ambition of that program. So what can we expect there?
I mean, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we do.
Indeed, the European Council has proposed a reduction of the InvestEU budget which would nevertheless, and then on the contrary, we have still the parliament that is very much behind a very considerable InvestEU budget. Obviously, it's in the balance between the two co-legislators what will be the end result. But nevertheless, we take into account that there will be a reduction. There will still be an important investment program, nevertheless, and we feel that well, there are two sort of conflicting, if you want, situations. On the one hand, there is a need for immediate recovery as a result of the COVID. But also, as Benedict said, this is not a reason to let's say, forgo any sustainability target or method that we want to put in place. On the contrary, precisely because there has been a lot of money that has been thrown and will be thrown into the economy right now, including under the Recovery and Resilience Facility, InvestEU, and so on. This is the right moment to make a transformation of that. So the way this impacts InvestEU is indeed actually on our side. We proposed to maintain the same level of climate tracking, target. Nevertheless, if you want to reinforce even in one particular window, the sustainability window, the climate and environmental target of 60%. And to maintain all sustainability proofing requirements that were in the original proposal. So, in a nutshell, we didn't see a need to review the
Hello, are you there?
I think we may have lost a few people. Ian Cochran is still connected. I don't know. Was that you, Guido?
I think, sorry, I think everyone is connected, just that the IT colleagues apparently turned off the cameras to improve the bandwidth. So I think we can, Stefan, if you are still there, I think we can continue with the session. Stefan, can you hear me?
I can hear you. This is Guido from Robico. I also heard Ian was still there. If Stefan is no longer here, it will be challenging.
Stefan is telling me that he can hear, but apparently he cannot speak. So I would ask the IT colleagues to try to resolve these issues. I'm really sorry. I think we are having some serious bad luck in this session.
I don't know if Stefan can ask us in the chat, perhaps, the questions for Guido and I, who appear to be actually the only ones that can speak right now.
Yes, that's a good idea as well.
Although I think Stefan might be trying to figure out how to get the mic back on.
Yeah. Matthias, can you please intervene and tell us?
Here we go. I think for Guido, Stefan has asked, Robeco is one of the leading asset management companies when it comes to sustainability. How Paris aligned are your portfolios?
All right, happy to answer that question. So in terms of Paris alignment of the portfolios, then first determining what Paris aligned would mean, and I think we all agree that Paris alignment would mean an associated carbon intensity that fits within the trajectory that will keep us well below 2 degrees. To determine what that actually means for a portfolio, we would have to follow the targets that are set already for 2030 and for 2050. So 2050 being net carbon neutral, and 2030 being half of the emissions what we have today, roughly speaking. To decarbonize towards half of the emissions in 10 years, that would constitute to about 7% reduction year on year, which is exactly also what is in the benchmark proposals of the EU TER. At the moment, we have strategies, we have portfolios that are able to make that switch, which are the ones that have freedom compared to their investment benchmarks. For investment strategies that have less of that maneuverability, for instance, because of a tracking error limit, this is more of a challenge, given that then you're much more dependent on what happens in the broader economy, if you have to stay close to the broader economy from your investment guidelines. And that's where engagement comes in, and where also we hope that investee companies will also do their part. So what we do is we are an active asset manager. So we actively allocate capital to these companies that are on the right track, based on the data that we do have, which is maybe not perfect, but there is quite some data available. And for investment funds that have more of a limit in terms of how much they can deviate from their benchmarks, the first few years will be possible, but then at a certain point, after a few years, you will really need to see broader decarbonization in the economy as well to remain on track. Then a question for Ian, I see coming in. So the taxonomy covers activities that can be classified as environmentally sustainable, but it leaves out for the moment numerous activities that are still not aligned with the Paris Agreement, nor SDGs. How can we enlarge the scope and look at entire portfolios? Should we expect the do no harm principle apply to all economic activities, regardless of being part of the taxonomy or not?
Great. Thank you, Guido, for playing co-moderator with me as we expect others hopefully to get connected back in. So I think that's a point that's been discussed quite a bit since the start of, in some respects, since we've started trying to classify what are climate or sustainable activities from the beginning, where often we see lots of effort and I think a lot of political will going into establishing together the list of the things that we should support. And I think that's really important, and it's a huge step forward, as Aldo was saying, about the need for a common language, a common set of definitions, and particularly as we start to see, a shared vision or shape that the transition needs to take within a given country or a region, such as the EU's policies, or at the international level, if we talk about the NDCs in that are part of the UNFCCC process. Although of course the NDCs could all be improved. I will just always add that caveat. What we don't see, however, is such a strong statement on what we need to scale down and, in some instances, relatively quickly stop. And I think this has been a push, if I now put my hat on as a representative of more the research, think tank, and NGO community on this panel, that we are missing important piece of the puzzle, which is a reality check on what we need to scale down and what we need to stop if we expect to jointly achieve our climate and sustainability goals. And I think this has been much more challenging politically to make happen, And of course, we can't have everything at once, but an important next step is more clear guidance for the market and for the real economy on what activities we see being part of the economy of yesterday, but not the economy of the future. And of course, that's going to vary country by country and region by region. There are some, of course, activities that are brown and let's say even dark brown, no matter what country you're in. And I think we all know coal and a lot of the fossil fuel sector does fall, particularly new exploration does fall into that area. But there are others that, you know, are really going to depend on how each country is going to make this transition and transformation. And going back to my presentation, that's why we really think we need to look at this linked to the question of a country's transition, which of course makes it more challenging to have a single joint definition of what's brown or what's bad. But I really think we do need to have some clear reference points that help us understand whether a counterparty's activities and general business model are aligned or not. And right now, the taxonomy is doing a good job of helping us understand what a positive contribution can be, but we do need other metrics and perhaps even another taxonomy to let us know what are the non-consistent or unaligned activities. And as again, from our end, this concept of do no harm is both one of the basic foundations of our approach, but also even when we look at the EU is doing with the taxonomy and this need to identify and understand what part of portfolios might be having significant harm, you know, it's there if, you know, a little bit in the background.
Thanks, Ian. I think it would be interesting afterwards to hear also what Giorgio has to say about what you just mentioned. But in the meantime, I have also a question for Benedict. So EBR, I hope you can hear me. EBRD has a specific geographical focus on Central and Southeastern Europe. What are the investment needs EBRD sees in the region, in particular regarding investments in green technologies? And in what ways are you trying to close these gaps?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So a number of our countries of operations in Central and Southeastern Europe are still highly carbon intensive. And there are a number of sectors where we need to continue to support the green transition. So I will just mention the example of the need to support further decarbonization, especially in the energy and in the industrial sectors. If we take countries such as Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, we can see that they still rely heavily on coal for their electricity generation. And this means that a real systemic change is needed towards a decarbonized, pollution-free energy system in those countries. And also in the energy sector, decarbonization very much needs to be accelerated. And in that, we really want to focus on energy-intensive industries, including the steel industry, the chemicals industry, and the cement industry. So EBRD supports this transformation, first of all, through innovative policy dialogue activities. We try to promote, for instance, the development of low-carbon pathways, and we also contribute to setting the regulatory and the market conditions that are favorable for renewable energy, for decarbonized fuels, and also for flexible energy networks. In terms of our financing activities, we will also focus on innovative renewable energy systems, on low carbon fuels, transportation and storage, also on the development of the hydrogen economy, and on the promotion of investments towards a more circular economy. But what is very important, as well as agreed by the internal community in the Paris Agreement, is that that transition needs to be a just transition. In those countries of operations that are mentioned, based on our estimates, around 90,000 jobs are still related to activities of coal mines and their supply chains. So we really need to make sure that this transition we want to promote is also supported by the provision of assistance to those communities that will be dealing with the social and economic impact of that transition. And in that context, the EBRD has recently adopted its own Just Transition initiative. So we want very much to promote economic inclusion and regional integration, and also, for instance, to really provide more support to local companies in those regions that could be affected by the transition. In the EU countries especially, we very much want to avoid any duplication, obviously, with the Just Transition mechanism of the EU. And in that sense, we really want to be additional to that mechanism. So, for example, in our countries of operations that already have or that will be working on territorial Just Transition plans, we will very much focus on using those plans as a guidance. And we will try to support the projects identified as Just Transition projects, either through advisory services with the InvestEU Advisory Hub, or also through financing through the InvestEU fund. So there are other sectors in those countries that require further support to the green transition, but this is just one of the examples.
Thank you very much, Benedict. Before passing on to Thomas, I would like also to give the floor to Aldo, because I know you want to also to provide some remarks.
Well, I just wanted to come back to your question before concerning areas that are not yet covered by the taxonomy regulation, notably social sustainability objectives. Here, I would like to underline in particular the ductility, the flexibility of the taxonomy regulation approach. First of all, it is clear, there is a clear statement in the regulation that ultimately the objectives that are set by the EU serve the SDGs. Now, it was also a clear recommendation of the high-level expert group on sustainable finance in January 2018 that social sustainability should also be considered by the Commission. And concretely speaking, the approach that has been taken by the EU Green Bond Standard also applies to areas that go beyond green. The idea is that in areas that are not yet covered by an official taxonomy, the decision with regard to the objective and the technical screening criteria that the issuer needs to clarify can be aligned with the taxonomy, even if they are decided by the issuer. What subject, of course, to one condition: that they follow the same logic, the same fundamentals, the same objectives. And this is exactly what is happening, for example, at the EIB, where we have started to cover areas of social sustainability, like, for example, education and health, and where, of course, we see a responsibility in clarifying to markets what we consider on the ground relevant in terms of objectives and technical screening criteria. And this is also something, a kind of a discovery process. COVID-19 is one typical example. Health started to be covered at the end of last year, and the objective that was set by our experts was access to universal access to affordable health services. Now this year, we have extended this target to cover also another subset of the SDG 3, which is health emergencies response and preparedness capacity, because we noted, for example, that the initially established criteria would not cover countries like Italy that score particularly high in terms of the UHCI index of the WHO that we consider as one of the technical screening criteria. So you see, there is a kind of discovery process that involves those that are active in the economy, that are active in the intermediation of money, to provide the value of their expertise for the debates that are going to come. And in this regard, I would like also to refer to the fact that the EC's consultation on the UGBS ends on October 2nd. And one element there is also, one question that has been addressed is indeed how the theme of a social bond standard should be addressed. So we are really in a process of transition here, where institutions like ours do have also to provide a synthesis of their knowledge, of their expertise on the project evaluation side and on the capital market side for this purpose.
Thank you very much. I'll just highlight that we have, just 3 more minutes or 2 more minutes before we are cut. So I'll ask quickly a question to Thomas. So how would you evaluate the current level of existing funds and expertise in Europe at the scale-up stage to support innovation champions, in particular in the area of climate and environmental solutions? What are the needs, and what should be the Commission doing, in particular through InvestEU? Are you there, Thomas? Apparently no. If not, I apologize. I would go immediately to Giorgio, and I'll ask you to comment and to ask you, alongside the InvestEU fund, the InvestEU Advisory Hub will provide the dedicated advisory services to protect promoters, financial intermediaries, and implementing partners to internalize the new sustainability. Thomas, we cannot hear you now. Can you provide more information on the Advisory Hub, its purpose, and how it will function? Very quickly, please, because I think the session is cut, at 1:30. Giorgio, if you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Giorgio. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Now on the Advisory Hub, this is again part of the InvestEU program, and it will be promoting a dedicated advisory services both to project promoters but also to financial intermediaries, precisely because there are some project when, for example, our implementing partners like EIB, BRD, or others are very much prepared to identify and improve projects proposed by in the different countries, and they have the technical capacity and skills to do so. Very often, for example, when we intervene through financial intermediaries, for example, and there are some programs like those run by the EIF, but also those that we expect to be run by the EBRD, as Benedict said, these financial intermediaries, in order to build a sort of spread our knowledge throughout those intermediaries, we will also ask our partners to provide technical assistance to them in order for them to then select the right projects, make them improve, comply with the legislation, and ensure that they maximize sustainability aspects. We are not going to deliver the Advisory Hub as directly at the Commission, but again, we will make use of our partners like the EIB, the BRD, the EIF, but also national promotional banks in the same proportion as the normal InvestEU fund. So 75% of that will be run by the EIB group and 25% by our partners. And we are already setting up some advisory products that will help us precisely to improve the sustainability projects in very different areas.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. Unfortunately, we couldn't hear Thomas because of the problems we had. I think, well, it's time to finalize our session. I would like to thank very much all the speakers and all the audience. And of course, I would like to apologize once again for the technical problems we had. I can tell you personally, it's the first time I had such problems, and I participated, as you probably, in many sessions already. In any case, I think the content was extremely interesting. We will post, I hope we can, for the audience, we'll be able to hear the recording. We're going to post it soon in our website. We'll also make available the PowerPoint presentations. I hope the presenters will accept, that we share the PowerPoints so that the audience can have also access to this information. And with that, I would like to conclude on behalf of Stefan, which unfortunately is also cut from sound. And I would like to wish you, of course, a very good afternoon and bon appetit if you're going for lunch now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much, Nuno, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nuno. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.